Hi, everybody. It's Tom Donahue from GroundTruth. How are you? I'm kind of like the worst college professor of all time because when class starts at 1 Central, that's when class starts. I don't close and lock the door, but I do like to be punctual because we all have things to do with our lives. It's so great for all of you to join us today for this presentation on getting maximum ROI from video. And I'm excited to share a lot of information with all of the attendees today. I'm also excited about taking questions while we are in the middle of this flow. And then I can't even begin to tell you how cool it's going to be for me to introduce two folks to talk a little bit more about the impact of video and connected TV in the marketplace with special guests of Maria Doherty and Christine DiMaria, both from Nexstar Digital. So let's get started. I've seen a lot of people, a lot of names here, folks that I know from the industry, folks that know GroundTruth. But for those of you who are on this call who don't know who GroundTruth is, we are a media platform. We take real world behavior, which is actual physical real world behavior, and we turn that into marketing that delivers real business results. And that's a really unique thing that we can do because everything that we see in the real world is a signal of intent. And when you match all of those signals together, especially when it's you out and about walking around, it gives you the ability to target in a really, really specific way. The way we do this is through blueprints. And by the way, I'll stop for a second and say, even though I have to go through these slides because I want to make sure everybody understands what our backdrop is, this is not a GroundTruth pitch. I just want to get this part out of the way so you understand how our methodology operates so that when we get into the actual content, you'll understand, okay, this is where they're coming from in terms of audience and in terms of foot traffic attribution, et cetera. But blueprints are really kind of the foundation of everything that we do. We have close to 5 million locations in the United States blueprinted. And a blueprint is nothing more than a geopolygon around the 4 walls of a specific location. So think of a Target or a Starbucks or a Dunkin' Donuts. Those 4 walls in the green on this slide will reflect what we are looking for when we look for foot traffic attribution. We also can extend that out to the lot. So if you've got curbside pickup opportunities or things like that, we can look at the lot and then the retail block, which is often very helpful when you are trying to target people with mobile and you want to pull them closer to your store because they're nearby. So everything that we do is built around those blueprints, and those blueprints are the foundation of the way in which we can create attribution and ROI for marketing campaigns when they're run through our platform. What sets us apart? I think a lot of folks can say the things that they do and do well. This is a hyper-competitive industry, as we all know. We're a credible, performance-driven, scalable, and reportable solution for everything that we provide to our clients. And we're going to talk really specifically about CTV today, but these things apply across the entire suite of services that GroundTruth provides to its client base, many of whom are on this call today. So let's get into it. Now that we're done with the commercial, I hope you could endure that. I love this slide, and I'd like to start with this slide because it's a scary slide. It's a very fragmented world today. We are all consumers of video content. In fact, we're looking at close to 6 hours a day of video content in our daily lives, which is actually not terrible when you think about the combination of television or linear TV, YouTube, TikTok, all the other ways in which you can acquire video assets. 6 hours is a reasonable portion of our waking hours being dedicated to consuming video content. The challenge with that is for an advertiser, they've got to find people in this crazy haystack of different options that are available across content, services, and devices, all of which are in play all the time for all of us as individual consumers. So this isn't any longer of sitting down on a Thursday night for must-see TV, where an advertiser knows that they've got you and they can plug you in and they're going to be able to serve you a spot. This is really very, very subjective in the way in which we consume content individually, but our real world behavior dictates the way in which us as audience members can be intersected with an ad that makes sense. So you've got different content, different networks, and different devices all competing for the ability for us to find an advertiser. And these are the things that great ad tech companies do. They intersect the audience desire with the ad spot in the right place at the right time. When we control all of this content, though, that we're watching, so it's a new ecosystem for marketers, and they have to figure out how to do this more nimbly. And that's where ad tech really adds power and clout in terms of targeting. So what is streaming video? Why is it a vital mix in today's marketing universe? We already know really what streaming video is, but we'll define it a little bit more closely. The why is really important. When I read an article yesterday about Generation Alpha, and for those of you who have children who were born 2010 or sooner, and 2010 on, they are part of Generation Alpha. Generation Alpha, the youngest or the oldest of them, will be 13 years old this year. We haven't even really considered them as a demographic, but they are going to be perhaps the most powerful demographic because they will be the largest populated generation in the history of counting generational population by the time they come of age. And what that means is everything that we're doing today is foundational to ensuring that we are marketing to Generation Alpha by using this data that we have today in order to make sure that we're getting really efficient the way in which we target and the way in which we serve spots that are relevant to the viewer. There are 3 boxes here that we should go through. Cord nevers. Cord nevers are people like, my son is 25. He grew up with cable in our household, but he will never have cable in his household and doesn't. So everything he's doing is consuming content across his SVOD or AVOD subscriptions. Cord cutters are people who kind of looked at their cable bill one day and said, what am I doing? And they just said, you know what, I can consume the content I need across streaming platforms, and so I'm going to cut the cord. That's 103 million people that are now viewing CTV as opposed to traditional linear or OTA. And then cord stackers, and that's people like me who have both cable and we have 6 different subscription video on demand services, as well as the myriad available AVOD services that exist out there today. So cord stackers are older generation people who aren't comfortable cutting away everything that they grew up with, but they are still consuming a lot of CTV. And if you look at the connected TV usage by age, you can see that the fat area is 25 to 64. And that's your sweet spot if you're a marketer. So we haven't even thought about Generation Alpha yet, and that's like a whole nother webinar. But for marketers that are on the call today, if you are doing things, if you're doing research papers or studies on Generation Alpha, I would love to talk with you about it because I'm fascinated by the clout that this generation is about to deliver and the technical savvy that they already have that is even more sophisticated than millennials or Gen Z. So convergent TV, it was a big buzzword last year. I still like it because I think if you're going to measure value of video, you can't discount any one thing. In other words, it's kind of a buffet now. And so you have to select according to how you're going to reach the people that you want to reach with your story. And so in the end, it's all just TV. So if you've got linear and you've got connected TV, then you have the ability to fuse those together to create reach extension, to get optimized targeting, to get literally like unlimited audience across linear, but severe, sophisticated targeting inside of CTV in order to have those 2 things complement one another so that you can optimize your message and get excellent ROI. And I think as marketers get better at this, and they're already doing it, but the fact of the matter is the CTV space right now is a very uncluttered marketplace, very uncluttered. There is more and more inventory coming onto the market every day. And the ability for us as sellers of that inventory to buy it all up it's impossible. It just keeps growing every day, as you can see by the chart here from eMarketer. More and more people are watching connected TV, or they're watching OTT on a desktop or a laptop or a mobile device up to 3 hours and 11 minutes a day versus traditional television at 2 hours and 55 minutes. So it's already usurped traditional television viewing on a daily basis. But the fact is, like, you still need both of them in order to reach the target audience you're trying to acquire. There are trade-offs to each of these platforms, and we'll get into those in a moment. But it's really important for you to know that you should figure out a way to blend these solutions and not cut any one thing out because it no longer looks like the shiny object. So what video products should we consider? We've got CTV, OTT, and then pre-roll. And those are the three I'm going to address. Rich media is also an option for video, but I personally don't view it as video because it is auto pop-up and it runs automatically in any kind of editorial content. Video is really video that runs in front of video content that's been requested. And so I'm going to kind of focus on these three things. And I've debated this internally with folks about rich media, but I do believe that if you're a purist about video, you want your video to run in front of video that's been requested or midstream or post-roll. You don't want it running in editorial content as a pop-up in the lower right-hand corner. It's less expensive and you're going to get a higher video completion rate, but there's no impact to it. So let's break these three down. So the first thing, and again, I apologize for those of you who are really sophisticated at this. Every time I talk to anybody in this space, I start here because even though we know this stuff, the curse of knowledge sometimes prevents us from making sure that we define it. CTV is just the big screen. It is the big screen in your living room or in your bedroom, and that is what we would classify as a connected TV. Everything else, including CTV, is called OTT, and that would incorporate 4 screens: phones, tablets, desktops, and the big screen. So OTT is really the umbrella. And then inside that umbrella is specifically CTV, which is just the big screen. There are pros and cons to buying just CTV because you're going to get the big screen experience versus OTT, which is, I kind of want people who are watching video, on-demand video content on the fly or at their laptop, not just on their television set. And so there's a balance and nuance to the one that you want to pick in order to reach the audience that you're trying to reach. So CTV is just ads running in big screens in on-demand content against TV quality long and short form content. OTT is, streaming on-demand video content on any screen. And by any screen, it's mobile, tablet, desktop, and television. And then pre-roll, or what's sometimes referred to as OLV. I'm old, so when I was riding dinosaurs, we called it pre-roll. But OLV is another term for pre-roll, and that's just defined as in-app video spots running inside of video content. And we have a YouTube example here, and I think that's the easiest one for everybody to envision what pre-roll is. You can X out of that video after 6 seconds if it's a skippable ad. And that is one of the downsides of pre-roll is it's clickable. In other words, you can get a website transfer from it, but you can also blow it out, which means that your story doesn't get fully told in the 15 or 30 seconds that you're hoping your spot will run. So in the end, you want to kind of look at everything that's available in your arsenal. If you're a video advertiser, if you're somebody who's on the doorstep of advertising in video, you look across the landscape and you say, all right, well, where should I place my money? It's not really about where you should place your money. It's about what the goal is. Like, what was your goal in terms of investing in this media? You've got a campaign KPI. You want to achieve that KPI. So now you have to look at the media that's available in order to do that. And that's the only way you can actually deliver return on investment is if you know in advance what your goal is. If after the fact you go, well, we kind of wish we'd have gotten more, a higher video completion rate or more click-through rate, it's too late because you purchased linear and CTV and neither of those give you the ability for click-through rate. So you failed in your ability to quantify your KPI, which means that you actually can't measure the ROI at the end. So it's really, really important for you to know what your goal is up front. Linear is that big top of the funnel, broad, untargeted reach. You want to shotgun Chicagoland. There's a guy running for mayor of Chicago. I saw a spot for him last night. I don't even live in Cook County, and I saw that spot. So that spot came out and it hit me. There was probably a reason it came up into Lake County, but I watched it and I thought, okay, that was kind of a wasted ad because I can't vote for this person, even if I wanted to. So it was sort of broad and untargeted, and it just carpet bombed the DMA. What I would have recommended to his campaign is look at the targeted capabilities of targeting zip codes or targeting DMAs with connected TV or OTT in order to put your message out in front of potential voters or voters who are on the fence or voters who you want to flip. And if you did that with CTV, you would have eliminated the ads going to Lake County, and you would have only focused on ads that were targeted in the zip codes or the DMAs where the vote would have actually made a difference. And so by eliminating waste, you give your campaign the opportunity to fulfill a KPI in the most cost-efficient way. And of course, the big value of return on investment is doing everything cost efficiently. If you're cost efficient on the front end, and I'm not talking about being cheap, but if you're cost efficient on the front end, the chances of you achieving ROI on the back end because your KPIs are solid is much greater. The last piece in this funnel, and I just put it at the bottom, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the smallest amount, it's actually interchangeable with CTV, is pre-roll. And pre-roll is a high volume, skippable, but clickable solution for getting your video message out there. When I say high volume, what I mean is if CTV is twice the CPM of pre-roll, that means you're going to get twice as many impressions from pre-roll as you would get from a CTV spot. So the question becomes, do you want it to be a non-skippable ad that somebody has to watch inside of content that it's targeted to? Or do you want it to just run at a high volume and kind of catch everything in the net and hope that a certain percentage of these people will not skip it and a certain percentage of these people will click on it? And if your ad is good, 50% of all campaigns win or lose by the creative that's being served. And I know that's an ugly thing to say to a webinar, but the fact is, if your creative is good and there's a call to action and it's targeted, then we should have a better than average chance or better than 50% chance of having a really successful campaign. If your creative isn't great, work with a partner who's going to be willing to tell you that, willing to say, there's no call to action here and we can't change the voiceover, but could we put some text in here so that we have a call to action? Or could we embed a QR code here so that we have some type of call to action that ensures that your ad is going to have some type of consumer engagement? Because otherwise we might miss here. You know, a good partner, a good consultant will say those things to an advertiser, and the advertiser might say like, well, we spent 10 grand on this for production. You say it's great, and there's nothing wrong with it for branding. But if you are looking for some type of ROI that's attached to this, we have to include some type of call to action or measurability. I always recommend blending CTV and pre-roll video assets because you're going to get more volume. The trade-off, of course, is that you squander a degree of your video completion rate because pre-roll is going to have a very low video completion rate. But the upside of it is you do give somebody the opportunity to click on an ad in pre-roll and then have that come out as a click-through rate into your website or your landing page. So best practices, know your trade-offs. First thing, what's your KPI? Be very clear about it. Measurable foot traffic, is it branding, is it website traffic, is it video completion rate or a VCR? Is it time on screen? What is it you're trying to accomplish from your video investment? And if you think about it and you say, well, we really need more people through the door, then that's a moment of measuring foot traffic. If you're saying, you know, we just opened a new restaurant, we want to make sure people know where we are, that's a branding play. There are still things that you can do within that branding play to make that a consumer touch point and have some intimacy between the spot and the consumer. But if you know what your KPI is, then you can start picking some of the things that you want to measure with your partner. Collaborate with your partner on how you're going to measure success. Make sure you set expectations for data and reporting. Sometimes you run a campaign and when the campaign's over, you say, well, that was great. And there's this kind of uncomfortable silence. And then the advertiser is looking forward to seeing some data, but there either isn't any data or the data they get is very thin. It's really important for you as the advertiser up front to say to your partner, I want to achieve this and I want to measure it this way. And then that way you can collaborate on those two things. Here's my KPI and here's what I want to measure. And if you can collaborate on those two things, you're going to get a much more effective video campaign. And your trade-offs will allow your consultant to say to you, then we should not be doing pre-roll. And then you go, but it's cheaper. And you say, okay, cheap is never good, and good is never cheap. You said you wanted to measure this. We are not going to achieve that objective if we start stacking against pre-roll. Oh, okay. All right. So work with your partners. Blend skippable pre-roll with CTV to get a lower CPM. If CTV's CPM is up here and pre-rolls is down here, and you can figure out how to blend that solution. I'm going to show you in a little while how you can actually do that. If you can blend these two things and you can still achieve your KPI, you're actually going to increase the volume that you're delivering to the marketplace. And oh, by the way, it's all still targeted to the same audience. So if you're looking for in-market shoppers for home furnishings, then you're still targeting via mobile pre-roll and connected TV the same audience. You're just doing it in a different medium and a different format. If it's contextual or category, I call it category, if those are the focus, set realistic goals for your KPIs. So GroundTruth is an audience-first company. We look at real-world behavior, we absorb all of that data, and then we build audiences around that. So we are, in theory, content agnostic. We do not care where my mom is because we know that she is in market for a car. And so we want to serve her an ad regardless of what content she's consuming. And that works. It's a difficult thing to explain because there's this hangover effect of buying television, which still lingers out there in the marketplace, which is content is king. And it's not. The consumer is king today. And so you got to chase the consumer down whatever video rabbit hole they're in and serve them the ad wherever they are. But the reality is categories still have value. Contextual advertising still has value. And so GroundTruth next month, well, this is the end of March. So yes, on April 1st, we will be releasing a category solution for CTV. So you will still have the great audience capabilities, but we're also going to add categories: news, sports, entertainment, drama, crime shows, et cetera. And so those categories are going to allow our advertisers to say, I want to buy a little bit of audience, but I want to buy sports as a category. And if you can do those two things together and blend those, you're really going to have a nice, juicy campaign to target with. But your KPIs are going to change because when you buy a category for contextual advertising, you're missing out on the audience that's watching Golden Girls instead of watching NASCAR. And so that person is still a sporto and still a target, but you've lost them because they're not in the category that you bought contextually. So we want to make sure that all the time, and again, this is a consulting thing that we can go through with anybody. We want to make sure that we blend these things together so the KPIs are realistic and can be achieved. For audience targeted campaigns, you're going to reach your target no matter what content they're consuming. As I said, I always use my mom as an example. If she's watching the History Channel, but we know that she is in the market for a condo, then I'm going to be able to reach her no matter where she is. And so if she leaves the History Channel and she goes to watch, Golden Girls, I'm still going to be able to track her and follow her, and I'm going to still be able to target her based on her audience profile and the way in which GroundTruth does things. And the last thing I'd say across this best practice is test, test, test. Test it all. Try it all. You don't have to spend a massive amount of money to test things, and you shouldn't. You should be able to come in like in a no minimum environment like ours is and just say, you know what, I just want to run a couple grand just to see what this looks like. And you do some taste tests and you figure it out. Video calculator tools. So there are basic trade-offs between video solutions, right? So the KPI, again, is going to determine the best video solution. Pre-roll generates click-through rate, but it yields a lot lower video completion rate because it's skippable. CTV is non-skippable and has the big screen power, and it produces a really high video completion rate. In our case, it's 90, I think the last stat I saw was 98%, which is not because GroundTruth does anything great. It's just because when you're sitting in front of your television, your inclination is not to turn the TV off, you're watching your show. You get a high video completion rate, but you get less impressions because the CPM is higher. OTT crosses all 4 channels, but some spots are I call them too big. for smaller screens. What that means is if you've got a lot of text, or, like if you're a car dealer and you're running in like an MSRP down at the bottom, or some kind of a, fine print on a smaller device, that's not going to land. And so you want to look at your spot and say, is this going to look better on a 50-inch TV, or is it going to look better on a 50-inch TV and a 3-inch screen? If I can achieve both, then OTT is a good solution. This is the next two slides are just slides that you should be aware of that you have access to as a GroundTruth client. The first is the GroundTruth Blended Video Optimizer. What we did was we took all of our video campaigns and we calculated the video completion rate for pre-roll, and then we calculated the video completion rate for OTT, and then we calculated the video completion rate for CTV. And then we combined that data and we tried to figure out what would be an estimated video completion rate if you had a $20,000 budget, you wanted to put $5,000 against pre-roll and the other $15,000 against CTV. The first thing it does, it spits out the total number of impressions that you're going to get. And then it tells you what the estimated video completion rate is based on your spread between pre-roll and CTV. If you flip those, you're going to get an even higher impression count because you just put $15,000 in pre-roll and $5,000 in CTV, but your video completion rate will go down. And so just having access to a tool like this gives you a really quick and easy way to go, here's my KPI, well, let's figure out what the best blended solution looks like. The CTV alone calculator, which is on the GroundTruth website, is really easy to use. You just put your budget in, and then you put whatever you're paying right now, and then it just generates a comparison analysis. It's kind of like the progressive name your own price tool type of thing. So you can go in and play around with that and get an idea of what you're paying right now, what you're leaving on the table potentially. We get beat a lot too. So, but it's a really nice tool for people to use. So we're getting to the home stretch, and then we're going to start talking with Maria and Christine, and I can't wait. But measure and differentiate for better ROI. Video advertising works. I mean, when 9 out of 10 of us say we want to see more videos for brands, it's not because we're sick and tired of flipping through a newspaper to look at a print ad. It's really hard to find a print ad in the newspaper today. So video is the solution that advertisers can use today to land with people who are watching video content 6 hours a day. 84% of us are convinced to buy a product or service based on watching a video. I am definitely one of those people. If I see something and I like what I see, I will do more research and then I will pull the trigger. If I have to read about it, I'm probably not going to be as impulsive in my purchase. But video marketers, in the end, they want a performance outcome that they can establish an ROI to. And most of the time that comes in the form of some version of a lead. A lead can be click-through rate, a lead can be foot traffic, a lead can be website activity from a CTV campaign. It could be QR code scans. So all of those things are qualified as leads, and video can produce higher lead gen for marketers when it's used efficiently. You have to differentiate. So you've got to know what options are available, and you got to figure out how to make your brand stand out. And I'm not going to run through all of these. This is what I call a popcorn slide for GroundTruth. But your partner should have all of these things. There are some things here that are very native and very unique to GroundTruth. But for the most part, you want to be able to make sure that you can check some boxes here before you start making investments in video. So GroundTruth attribution, this is really kind of an interesting thing that we've put together here. Everything starts with an impression. You can't sell anything to anybody in video if you haven't served an impression. So the first thing you want to measure, obviously, is the impression and its video completion rate and its ultimate aggregated time on screen. So when the impression's served, virtual visits is nothing more than us placing a pixel on a client's website and being able to see whether or not somebody picked up their phone while that spot was running or right after that spot, and then went out to that website and took a look at what the features were. The pixel fires back and we're able to capture that as post-impression attribution. It's really powerful. QR codes, we partner with Flowcode, which is the best QR code company in the industry, bar none. And Flowcode gives us access to first-party data, or gives you access to first-party data you can collect through any scans that occur. But it also, in my opinion, makes each video spot sticky. When you see an ad today on television or on CTV and there's a QR code, you remember it. You're more inclined to remember the brand. It creates a stickier invention where they're going, that's kind of cool. And being able to customize the QR code so it's not just a bunch of black and white dots with your brand logo in the center or a call to action underneath incents the consumer to take some action on that QR code. And then lastly, and I think the most important thing that GroundTruth does and does very well is measure foot traffic based on those blueprints and based on the way we acquire real world behavior and turn it into real business results. In the end, if your KPI is, I want foot traffic, I want my door to swing, and we blueprinted your facility, we're going to be able to measure that based on the impressions that are being served and viewed, and then the subsequent device walking through the door. 5 reasons to consider GroundTruth. This is my last plug, I promise. Audiences, non-skippable ads, our multi-touch attribution, I think is really kind of a power play for us. It's the virtual visitation, QR codes, foot traffic. And we measure those things individually as a consultant to make sure that you're getting the most out of your KPI. We are a DSP, so we're not a middleman. So we're buying the media, we're serving the media, we're optimizing the media. Our account management team is in touch with you and with the media all the time during the flight. So we are basically the entire turnkey solution for our advertisers. And then last is weather triggers. We own the weather bug, and the weather bug allows us to ingest into the GroundTruth ad tech solution all of different weather conditions that are occurring all across the United States and Canada. And so if you have a campaign that you're running and you say, I don't want my impressions to run when it's snowing or when it's raining because I know my foot traffic is going to drop off, then you can pause the campaign with these weather triggers and save those impressions for a sunny day. And I think that's a really easy way for you to think about, like, eliminating waste is more important than just carpet bombing the universe and hoping for the best. And weather triggers is helpful in that way. These are some of the things that we do. This deck will be available to everybody, so I won't read through them. And I want to say thank you. And I want to then get to our fireside chat. And I want to talk with my friends, Maria Doherty and Christine DiMaria, both from Nexstar Digital. Just a disclosure, I have known these two ladies for, Christine I've known for 18 years, and Maria I've known for 9. And I am just thrilled to have them both on this call today because they're just great friends of mine, and they're also wicked smart. They've forgotten more about digital marketing than I'll ever know. Maria, I see you. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you, Tom.
Oh, that's right. Maria's in Denver. Christine, you on? And Maria and Scene. Teen, are you there? Caller. All right. She may be having a technical difficulty. She had some spotty Wi-Fi the other day when we were pre-planning this. Maria, I'm just going to ask you some questions. Let's just figure out some ways that we can add a little value to. Hi, Christine. Add a little value to the conversation that we're having about CTV and about video and about return on investment. But I want to start with you've been doing this for over a decade, digital strategy and sales enablement for a number of companies. What have you seen as some of the biggest changes that companies are kind of leading into to interpret their digital advertising today?
Yeah, so I think I have been doing this for long enough where we're seeing things come back again, almost like wardrobe from the 80s and 90s right now. And, what we're seeing is a lot of back to the basics. And what I mean by that is simplicity in a very complicated environment. So, for example, like a very short, concise creative that is 3 seconds is almost the new 30-second spot. Whether you're talking on TV or really any device, you're going to have a captive audience for about 3 seconds until they start multitasking, whether they're watching a game or their favorite show or catching up on the news. And creative is starting to reflect that. And I'm really glad to see that because, what you said about the importance of creative, I think folks now have to think about the form factor and the environment that that creative is going to be and how to get it out there. Make the most of that 3 seconds if that's all you have.
Mhm.
So that's definitely something that we're seeing, and I think that will continue. The
Do,
other
do you,
thing, oh, go ahead.
let me stop you for a second. Do you think that that is and I'm not really being cheeky here, I mean this, is that a reflection of our shorter attention spans, or is that a reflection of the reality that you've got to land your shot, as quickly as you can to get somebody's attention?
Yeah, I think it's definitely both. You mentioned with the YouTube skippable ads, you've got a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
So instead of waiting for the big reveal at the end, get it out early, get it out quick, at least, get the brand name or the deal or whatever it is that, you really want to have people remember about your message. Do it early and do it quick.
Cool. And then you had a follow up on that?
Yeah, you really got me thinking about the QR code in your presentation. And I've got to tell you, that has to be the biggest comeback of our time in the digital space.
Yeah.
20 years ago, it was like, oh, it's a fad, it's a trend. And I also said apps were going to be a fad. So shows you how much I know there.
Right. Yeah.
But, including that QR code on the video or the TV spot, it helps us guide the behavior we want. And it also helps provide really important data that can be used for audience insights. And what I like about it is it's immediately actionable. You have that code. So as a user, instead of trying to remember a business name or a website
Right.
and Googling it later and giving all the credit to Google, now you have a direct way to access that. And I hope some days that will be by voice or by an easier way than having to have your phone capture an image. But I think there's a long way to grow there with that. And, that data can't only be used for just steering the campaign, but like really helping those businesses make important decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the smaller businesses that don't have the budgets of the big brands, they can still leverage all of these tools and optimize the value of the investments that they're making. The tools are available to everybody. It doesn't matter what the budget size is. That's the thing I think that's kind of egalitarian about digital marketing today, is you don't need to be a giant brand. You can actually get in the game and make your impact with a much smaller budget just by using some of the tools that have developed around CTV.
You got it, especially with the local, zip code advertising that you were talking about earlier. It's getting to the right person in the right environment at the right time.
And Christine, you and I have known each other forever. I've learned so much from you digitally over the years, just in terms of like how to address the value of data and some of the things that Maria was talking about. But you and I have kind of grew up in the local world. And we have always been kind of local consultants. And I was wondering, like, you've had your finger on the pulse of this for a long, long time. How have you seen advertisers and marketers change their behaviors around video and CTV in local markets, in maybe just in the past few years?
Well, first things first, I love how you introduced me as a digital expert, and then I'm having technical difficulties. Don't hold that against me.
Hello.
But I've seen a lot of changes, Tom, and your one slide about the cord cutters versus the cord nevers is perfect, because in the past it was, yes, we trust our local news source and our news station. And so anything that we see there, we're going to believe, and it's going to inspire us to take an action. And now what we're seeing is you need to have video everywhere, not just with your local news source, but going back to what you were talking about, and I'll use myself as an example. I watch WGN here in Chicago religiously every morning. So if you want to get me with an advertisement traditionally, you'll get me in the morning. However, the remainder of the day, when I'm getting my news alerts and news information, I'm going to WGN.com. And so if you don't have an ad or a pre-roll ad when I go to WGN.com, you're missing out on me as a potential client or customer.
And we know your audience profile, and we know what your real world behavior is. And so when we can tie those things back together, We're not going to fire a spot out at you for baseball cleats when we really should fire a spot out at you for Sephora, right?
Exactly.
And so that's,
Exactly.
I mean, just knowing how the sausage gets made, is a huge advantage for marketers when they're working with companies like ours to kind of sort all that stuff out and go, oh, we know who this person is and we know how to find them. And we just have to wait. I always kind of call it like waiting at an intersection. You're just waiting at an intersection for the right person or car to drive by to go, I see you, you're the one I was looking for, and now I'm going to hit you. And that's the kind of the way you can target efficiently today with any kind of video advertising.
And also,
ahead.
too, the other part of your question, kind of similar to what Maria was saying, is, one, going back to basics, where now we have the ability to add a QR code to a TV commercial. So you can get attribution now from how people are watching traditionally and if they're scanning and taking action. But then what's also cool about that is now I'm seeing more and more marketers want things beyond the click. So while click is still an important measurement, they still want maybe now to use pixels to show conversions. Maybe they want more details on who watched my video through its entirety. And then also too, foot traffic attribution has become extremely popular and an in-demand attribution tactic, because think about it. How cool is it if you can say to your client, hey, I saw this CTV ad streaming Real Housewives, and then I actually walked into your brick and mortar. And that's very powerful, and it's very rare, or it's a rarity that a lot of vendors can do that, or partners like yourself can. So that's something that I'm seeing become more and more important.
It's cool. And Maria, do you have anything you want to add to Christine's thoughts on that? How that local market impact is really, really changes the game for marketers?
Yeah, I think you touched on something, Christine, and it's particularly with CTV, it's a greater focus on lift. What happens beyond the video, beyond the click for a period of time to really measure that success versus the instant gratification of seeing that click-through metric come in right away. It's like that's kind of a short-term success. But again, looking at the longevity and the overall impact that that video can give you for a lift overall is not something to sleep on.
Yeah, I actually looked at some data this morning on a campaign. It's a QSR, quick serve restaurant campaign that's being run out of the Midwest, and it was, obviously it's got components of mobile and components of CTV. It's in excess of 700 visits, foot traffic attribution visits to this QSR restaurant, which is great. But what really matters, it's going a step further than just simply looking at a whole number and going, wow, that's really cool, is what's the time frame between the spot and the visit, right? And so in QSR, surprisingly, the lion's share of those, not the lion's share, but the majority percentage of those are happening within 6 hours of seeing the spot. So you're sitting there going like, right, if that's true, how do I effectively use day parting to achieve what I want to achieve? Because I don't want to run these overnight because I'm not open at 3 in the morning, right? And so if it's a 6-hour window and you really want to capitalize on people who are hungry, how do you do that, right? Conversely, I looked at some other data that was actually for a car dealer, and the car dealer's gap between the video being viewed and foot traffic visitation was about a week. And so between that spot and then we only count it once. So the first time you see it is the only time that you, in theory, see it. And so we're looking at that first impression and then the distance between that first impression and the visit. Now, in between there's a frequency measure that has to be considered. So that person may have seen that spot 2 or 3 more times in that 7-day period. But when we measure those things, you can start to, as you were saying before, Maria, you can start to get really, really good about how you want to tweak your advertising and your budgets to optimize the return on investment that's available.
And what would be really cool with that, Tom? What would be cool is GroundTruth, media companies, all of us are sitting on a wealth of data, right?
Oh, yeah.
But the ability to take that type of data by the category, quick serve, we know we're expecting a 6-hour turnover. Automotive, that may be a 30-day turnover, is just really kind of identifying those time regions by advertising category and being able to provide our advertisers more of a realistic, not only expectation management, but way to optimize their campaign in
Mhm.
order to, give them a lot more for their buy.
That's great. It's a really good point. We've always looked at, and we still look at, time of day, right? So where are the spikes in visitation and time of day? It used to be for phone calls, and now it's for foot traffic, as at least it relates to the data that we provide. But what if you were like expanded that out and you were a little bit less granular about time of day, and you started looking at those time gaps, right? And you started looking at those spike days, and that car dealer had the spike days were Tuesday and Wednesday, which I thought was unusual, but that's what it showed. And so when you start laying that out across categories, you can start generalizing what an advertiser can expect in certain chunks of time. And then more importantly, you can actually start carving up where you want your budget to land based on those chunks of time. So don't waste a lot of impressions on a Monday. What's the point, right?
Yeah.
So,
Let's build it.
yeah, like we're going to patent this. This is a Maria Doherty special right here. So, the performance marketing is everything today. Marketers are dependent on results. They have to prove them to if they're an agency, they have to prove them to their client. If they're a broadcast company like Nexstar is, they're constantly under pressure to ensure that they're proving the value not only of their broadcast advertising, but also the digital solutions that you're providing. And then GroundTruth. I mean, when we sell direct, we're constantly under pressure to demonstrate performance marketing results. So, Maria, I'll start with you. How do you think clients have changed their mindset and their strategy around performance marketing measurement as consumer dollar compression continues to intensify? There are too many car dealers and not enough people buying cars, and so the consumer dollars are compacting. How are marketers kind of squeezing us a little bit in ways that that require us to be a little bit more agile with our performance marketing capabilities?
Yeah, I think they're really forcing us to force them to get specific. You had mentioned this in one of your slides, an all-encompassing branding, click-through, foot traffic campaign, that's a unicorn. That doesn't exist. So we have to urge them to focus on what matters most. But in order to do that, we also have to understand why that matters and how they're going to measure that. Because if we don't ask like that follow-up question, we may be crafting a solution that they're unable to measure, right? I mean, they all want the measurement, but how do you do that? How do you actually get to that intelligence? So, that's a really important thing for us to kind of keep pushing at. And again, we're not assuming that they don't know how to. We just want to make sure we're aligned and we are truly getting to the right solution, not just for how they're going to measure, but how that's going to impact their business. Great, we measured it. Well, what does that mean for your business?
Right, exactly. Yeah, just showing up with data doesn't help if they can't interpret it as a result of performance marketing solutions, right? And so you've really got to kind of most marketers are really savvy today. I mean, they're not. This is not your dad's marketing, right? I mean, this is real. These folks are really sophisticated, and so when we show up to sell our wares, and we've really got to understand not just what their KPIs are and how they're going to measure those things, but how to get closer together so that we become part of their organization, so that in the end, the person who is making that buy feels really comfortable with the outcome that's been established in terms of criteria. And I think that's I think really, like you call it, a unicorn. I think the purple squirrel is the term I would use. The purple squirrel for a lot of advertisers today is they don't know what they want to accomplish. And I'd rather slow the process down until they are clear about it than race into it and say, you need to do this, because it never works. It never ends up working well. There's people who are disappointed. You're disappointed. And so it's better to slow down and say, wait, let's really organize our definition of what you're trying to accomplish first.
That'll work until we're having Generation Alpha buy from us.
Oh my
Anybody
God.
else really disturbed about them being called Generation Alpha?
Alpha. I know they think they're alpha dogs too. This article I read really, I exactly had that response. I was like, phew, these people are going to bury us, you know? Hey, Christine, I wanted to ask you a question about content. I don't want to say content versus audiences, but you know where I'm going. If somebody says to you, I only want to run in sports, I know my people are only watching sports, they're not watching anything else on demand, right? In your head, though, you're saying, no, I mean, your audience is everywhere. It's in that scattered hayfield right now. We got to find them wherever they are. Stop being assumptive that they're going to be only in this bucket. How should we treat that as, you know, as consultants into this space, in terms of not wanting to tell somebody like, don't just buy content, but how do we get people to understand that blending audience and content is a better strategy than just purely going contextual and hoping for the best?
Well, you said it earlier, Tom, when you were talking about some of the slides. Well, one of the key things, and this, people ask me this all the time, and actually I just had this happen or come up with one of my Ohio markets recently, where the client said specifically, I only want to be on ESPN and sports apps. And so the understanding and the explanation came with, first, what are your KPIs? So when Maria was saying, you know, what is your buying cycle? What is your desired outcome? And how do you want people to interact with you? That's important to know, number one. But two, if you're looking for, let's say, okay, explaining to the client, if you're looking for people who have an affinity to sports, just focusing on sports apps is not you're going to miss a lot of people. While yes, you might miss people who are sports enthusiasts, hence why they're there, you're missing out on me. So I'll use myself as an example. You know, I love football. I'm on fantasy football. I have my own girls league. I'm really big into it. Never on ESPN. I can't even tell you the last time I went to ESPN, except for watching it traditionally for Monday Night Football. But think about it, how long is the football season, right? And not only is that condensed, but how many Monday Night Football games are there?
Right.
And I'm not streaming or watching any programs on ESPN. So just making sure that the clients understand that.
Yeah.
And granted, we can do it, you know, and that does happen. But usually I'll say 9 times out of 10, the clients understand that, they get that, and it's an impression is an impression.
I hope my hope as we release categories, so that our clients can start to, you know, kind of buy the way they want to buy. I mean, my point of view on it is I would prefer audience, because I think that it provides better performance marketing results. But I want to let people buy the way they want to buy, and there's nothing wrong with contextual. In fact, I think it's a pretty powerful solution. It has been for 80 years. But when you have an alternative to contextual or category marketing that is much more efficient and targeted in audience, blend them. And so that would be the kind of the solution that I'm hoping as we roll out categories at GroundTruth, that we are able to have that conversation with clients who are like the one you said.
And one last thing I want to say, and this comes up a lot, but I always encourage the clients to not assume. And this can happen a lot. Just because you shop a certain way, you look for a product a certain way, doesn't mean your clients do. And, you know, just putting it in, okay, how does maybe your daughter shop or your son versus your dad or your mom? Like you use your mom as an example.
Right.
And one thing I will say, I really love that slide. That's why I keep referring to it, but with the cord cutters, the cord stackers, the cord nevers. I'm a cord stacker, but what's interesting is my father-in-law is 80 years old, and he was one of the first cord cutters that I know.
Yeah. He just said,
and a lot of that too has changed because of COVID and more people being at home or wanting to, watch how much they're spending.
Yeah, that's a key. The key in that slide, I think, is part of it is the economics of it. Part of it is the growing up with it, right? But in the end, I still believe that the place for linear at the top of that funnel is always going to be there. I mean, it's always going to be the big dog, right? You just get critical mass out into the space, and you can do it in a relatively cost-efficient way. but your targeting capabilities are really where that sweet spot starts to slide in, right? And that's where that CTV and pre-roll capability really starts to kind of complement that top tier buy of linear. So as we get close to the end here, and we could do this for hours, and I really wish we could. I will have you back next time we do this. I so enjoyed this conversation, just catching up with both of you. But as we close, if you had any advice for anybody who's on this call that is considering any aspect of video advertising or blending CTV or testing CTV or testing pre-roll, if you had any advice for them, how would you recommend that they test and measure those things in their budgets? Christine, I'll start with you.
Well, I like your approach, Tom. One great thing about digital is you can optimize. And so let the experts and your partners be the one that help you do that. And again, having the right mix. It was, 10 years ago, it was, hey, you need to be doing search. And that was the place to be. 5 years ago, it was social. Now it's video, and it's video everywhere. And if you have the right mix and knowing that, okay, me, Christine DeMaria here in Chicago, I'm consuming linear in the morning. I'm consuming the .coms, whether it be WGN.com or Yahoo or wherever else I'm going to maybe watch a clip of the Cubs game the night before. I get to see that commercial online, but then also streaming. All I do at night when I'm at home, and have the time to is watching things via stream. So ensuring that you're covering your bases and doing it and you can start small, like you said. You'd rather be slow and get it right than try and say, hey, give me all your money. And then that's not a situation anyone wants to be in. So that's what I would say. And the great thing about digital, we can optimize and say, hey, this is working better. And by having measurement tools like foot traffic attribution, pixels on the site, video views, clicks, we can guide our clients into the best optimization for the most effective results.
Very good. Very cool. Maria, you want to close us out?
Yeah, I would just add to that. Don't waste your media spend on crappy creative. Work with your media partners, work with your tech partners to figure out what's going to work before you buy the media and not at the end. There's nothing worse than doing a campaign recap and saying, well, this creative, performed 50 times better than this creative, but guess what? The campaign's over now and you missed that opportunity. So figure out how to get in front of it and get the most out of your really good, heavily invested in creative.
How many times, the three of us, we've all actually been in a room and done it where we've said to somebody, this creative is not going to get you to the promised land. And I can remember the situation and the client said, what do you mean? And then I think it was me, because Irish Mafia, I was like, this has no call to action. It's kind of, it's soft. And they were like, well, what can we do? And that's where I remember we were saying, like, well, why don't we embed some text, call to action down at the bottom. Let's figure out some way that we can juice this thing up. And it helped, but you're right. Crappy creative or weak creative is the single source of failure. It's not targeting anymore. That stuff is automatic. It's not media. There's plenty of it out there, and we can optimize for brand quality and delivery. It's not any of the capacities that an ad tech company can bring. Sometimes it really just rests with, if you're targeting the right way, but your ad is not optimized for impact, then use the tools that companies like ours can deliver. Stick a QR code in there, make it more memorable and actionable. Put a pixel on your website to make sure that you can track any kind of post-impression activity that may have occurred. And then, of course, the foot traffic stuff is, I think, it's the end all be all if that's the thing that somebody's KPI is trying to measure.
And one last thing, and Tom and Maria, you both said it, is the reason why people want shorter content. So they may prefer to see a 15-second video over 30-second is we're more impatient nowadays than ever. And so you have a more limited time to capture somebody's attention. And if you have poor creative or that creative or call to action's not going or doing what you said it's supposed to do, that will turn away a consumer faster than anything. So
yeah, test a 6 and a 15 and see which one performs better. Christine, Maria, thank you so very much for joining today. I am so appreciative and grateful of your time and your expertise. I hope that everybody who's on the call had a really good opportunity to take some notes. The three of us are always available if any of you are interested in having a little bit more of a conversation about how to optimize video for return on investment. That ends our webinar for today. I am so thankful to all of you for being here and spending an hour with us. Christine DeMaria, Maria Quinn Doherty from Nexstar Digital, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Folks, have a great afternoon. Thank you.